Hi everyone, myself Dr. P. Soumya, working as an assistant professor in the Department of Chemistry, Institute of Aeronautical Engineering. In this session, I'm going to discuss about sulfur cycle. So in this, I will discuss about what is sulfur cycle, different steps of sulfur cycle, importance of the sulfur cycle, and human effect on sulfur cycle. So first, we should know what is sulfur cycle. Sulfur, it is one of the most abundant elements on the earth. We know that the sulfur, it is one of the most abundant elements on the earth, and it is in a yellow color, and it is a brittle, tasteless and odorless non-metal. Sulfur, it is a non-metal. It is in yellow color. It is in brittle, tasteless, odorless non-metal. So sulfur, it is present in all kinds of proteins. So like amino acids, sulfur, it is present in all type of proteins like amino acids. So the plants directly absorb sulfur containing amino acids such as methionine, cysteine, cysteine. So here the plants directly absorb sulfur containing amino acids such as methionine, cysteine and cysteine. So here this sulfur, it is one of the most abundant and abundant element on earth. So it is the physical properties are it is in yellow color, it is brittle, tasteless and odorless non-metal. So sulfur, it is present in all kinds of proteins. So we know that the plants, this can absorb the sulfur in the form of amino acids such as methionine and cysteine. So sulfur, it is released into atmosphere. Sulfur, it is released into atmosphere by the burning of fossil fuels. Sulfur, it is released into atmosphere by the burning of fossil fuels and volcanic activities, decomposition of organic molecules. So sulfur, it is released into atmosphere in various process, through various process. So first one is the burning of fossil fuel, and through the volcanic activities and through the decomposition of organic molecules. So this is the source. Sulfur, it is released from the three process like burning of fossil fuels, volcanic activities, decomposition of organic molecules. On land, sulfur is stored in underground. So on land, on earth, the sulfur, it is stored in underground rocks and minerals. So it is released by precipitation, weathering of rocks and geothermal vents. So here in this, on the earth, the sulfur is stored in underground in the form of rocks and minerals. So it is released, can be released, regenerated by the precipitation, weathering of rocks and geothermal vents. So sulfur cycle, it is first we should know what sulfur. It is a green, yellow color, and it is brittle, tasteless and odorless non-metal, and it is present in all kinds of proteins like amino acids. And sulfur, it is released into the atmosphere by the various processes such as burning of fossil fuels, volcanic activities and decomposition of organic molecules. So what is the importance of sulfur? So important elements of sulfur. So here this is we know that this is very important. It is which is used in industrial process. And sulfur dioxide, that is another form of combined form of sulfur, that is sulfur dioxide. It is used as a bleaching agent and used to bleach wood pulp. So it is sulfur dioxide. It is used as a bleaching agent which is used to bleach the wood pulp. And sulfur dioxide also kills the molds and bacteria. So, and the sulfur, it is found in every living cell like amino acids like cysteine, methionine. So sulfur is found in every living cell. So every living cell, it is having proteins, and it is having proteins are made up of by amino acids. So here long used as, so this sulfur, it is used as a medicine. So it is also used as a medicine. So here in this brimstone, it is used in the olden days. brimstone, which is a form of sulfur. It is used as a medicine in olden days. So before the advent of antibiotics in the 1940s, before the advent of antibiotics in 1940s, sulfur containing drugs, sulfur drugs, so these were commonly used to treat infectious diseases. So this so before 1940, before the inventing the antibiotics in 1940, so sulfur containing drugs, so that meaning the sulfur drugs, these are commonly used for the treatment of infectious diseases and component of penicillin class antibiotics. And this is sulfur is also used as a component of penicillin class antibiotics. So medications for dandruff and warts have this ingredient. So medications which are used for dandruff and which are used for the removal of dandruff and warts, these have sulfur as an ingredient. So combining alcohol and sulfur, it can be used to treat acne. Combining alcohol and sulfur, so the combination of alcohol and sulfur, it can be used to treat the acne and other skin disorders. So this sulfur, it is a very important element in industrial process. This is used as a drug for various skin and various type of diseases. And also sulfur dioxide, it is killing the bacteria and also molds. It is also used as a bleaching agent to bleach the wood pulp. So these are the very important uses of sulfur. So and another use is so how it is used means it is also used to make cements, matches, fireworks, dyes and fungicides. So this sulfur also used for production of cement, matches, fireworks, dyes and also for the synthesis of fungicides. So powdered sulfur, it is found in lotions. Powdered sulfur, it is used in lotions and skin cream ingredients. So the sulfur, it is also used to make cement, matches, fireworks and dyes, fungicides. So this powdered sulfur, it is found in lotions and which are used for the skin diseases. So here sulfur, it is used, we know that sulfur, it is used as a bleaching agent and it is used to make fertilizers and it is used as a disinfectant and it is also used for making insecticide. So sulfur dioxide, it is used to it is produced from various processes. And sulfuric acid, this is another form of sulfur. Sulfuric acid, that is acid, so it is used in various processes. And carbon disulfate, that is also another form of sulfur. So and also sulfur, it is used for making sulfur ointment and it is used for making gunpowder and it is used for making matches. So these are various uses of sulfur, in our human daily life. So in the sulfur cycle, if coming to the sulfur cycle, the biogeochemical cycle. So it is also example of a biogeochemical cycle. So this is also example of biogeochemical cycle. So in this biogeochemical, the sulfur cycle is showing the collection of processes by which sulfur moves in its different forms between the terrestrial, aquatic, living systems on earth. It is called sulfur cycle. So this is sulfur cycle, it is nothing but movement of sulfur into various forms, in different forms between terrestrial, aquatic, living systems. So here sulfur cycle, it is nothing but it is a process by which sulfur moves in its different forms. So between terrestrial, aquatic, living systems on the earth, it is called as sulfur cycle. So if we see the sulfur cycle, so in this atmospheric gas, sulfur dioxide, so this is coming from the factories and it is coming from the burning of fossil fuels. So here this fossil fuels. So in this, so if we see this diagram, this sulfur cycle in this sulfur dioxide. So this hydrogen sulfide. This is sulfur dioxide is one of the form of sulfur, and hydrogen sulfide also. So this is also combined form of sulfur. So if it is present in atmosphere, so it may cause the precipitation. It may cause the falling of acid rain or snowfall. So here, by this snowfall, the weathering of rocks will take place. Weathering of rocks will take place. So by that, so here the water which is runoff, and this is also dissolving some of the sulfur compounds. Some of the, so it is moving on the surface of the earth by the by dissolving all the components which are present in surface of earth, so including sulfur. So here this is a surface runoff. So here this is having the water which is flowed on the surface. So this is having sulfate, that is SO4 minus 2. Sulfur, it is in the form of sulfate. It is in the form of sulfate. So this sulfate, it will converted into sulfide. So sulfide, it is in the sediments. So it is present, it is buried, it can become as sediments, rocks. So after runoff, these sulfates are again, these are forming sediments, rocks like sulfide sediments. So these are fossils and fossil fuels. So these are producing, these are going into these factories, and these are used for the various process in the various industrial purposes. And in this, then by burning of fossil fuel, we will get the sulfur again. So this is one of a sulfur cycle. So this is different forms of in this process, the sulfur moves in its different forms like sulfur, sulfate, sulfide, and like that. So it is moving into different forms between terrestrial, aquatic, as well as living systems. So if we see this, if we see the tree, so if we see this tree, so in this, this animal is taking the animal is taking this tree. So animals are consuming herbivore. So these are trees. So in this sulfur cycle, so this is one of the cycle in this sulfur. So sulfur dioxide, it is used for, it is causes the acid rain, and which is from the acid rain and snowfall, weathering of rocks and runoff of surface will take place because of this sulfate ions. So this will present in water. So these sulfide ions, these are forming sediments, sulfide sediments. So these are, so making fossils and fossil fuels. Because of these fossil fuels, so again sulfur is enters into the atmosphere. This is one cycle. So if we see this another cycle, that is reduced sulfur. So like H2S or hydrogens are like sulfide, HS minus, H2S and HS minus. So this is undergoing bacterial oxidation, and it is forming sulfate ion again. This is another cycle, sulfur cycle. In this reduced sulfur, so that is H2S. So in this, this is reduced sulfur. This is undergoing bacterial oxidation. In this, so in this sulfur HS minus, this is converted into SO4 minus 2. This is undergoing oxidation. So that is sulfate ion. So this sulfate ion, this is taken, this is which is present in soil. So these are absorbed by the plants. These are absorbed by the roots of the plants. So after these plants are using this sulfur for the growth of plants and trees. So after that, these plants or trees, these are consumed by the herbivores like cows and animals, and these are again, so these the waste which is coming from the animal or plant. So again, this is having organic sulfur. So this is also having the waste from the plant as well as animal, which is having organic sulfur. So when it is undergoing decomposition by the bacteria and another other microorganisms, so this is forming again fossil fuel or fossils, fossil fuel and fossil fuel. So this will also giving again sulfur. So finally it is giving sulfur, which is enter into the atmosphere, So this is also one of the cycle. If we see the sulfate ion, so which is used sulfate ion in the soil, so this is also coming from the fertilizers which are used in the farming. So that is sulfate in the form of SO4 minus 2, which is coming from two process by the reduction. So by the oxidation of reduced sulfur and by the fertilizer. So by the by the usage of fertilizers. So when these fertilizers run off, so this water also having that sulfate ion. So this is sulfur cycle. So in this, the sulfur is coming from various process and which is into the water. So in the water which is having sulfate ions, this will form sediments. Again, it will form fossil fuels. These fossil fuels again it will give sulfur which is enter into the atmosphere. So this is the cycle. This is sulfur cycle. In this, sulfur moves in its different forms between terrestrial, aquatic, living systems on Earth called sulfur cycle. So the process of sulfur cycle, it is explained below. The sulfur is released by weathering of rocks. So sulfur it is released in different types, different forms like sulfate, sulfide like that. So first main process is the sulfur it is released by weathering of rocks. Sulfur comes in contact with air and it is converted into sulfates. Sulfur comes, it is contact with air and it is converted into sulfate. So here first process is sulfur it is released by the weathering of rocks, So in form of sulfur. So this sulfur it is again contact, when it is contact with the air, it is converted into sulfate. It will converted into sulfate. So sulfates, these are taken up by the plants. The sulfates, various forms of the sulfate. So these are taken by the plants and microbes, and these are converted into organic forms. So sulfates, these are taken up by the plants and microbes. These are converted into organic forms. So the organic form of sulfur is then consumed by the animals. So through their food, and the sulfur moves through the food chain. The sulfur moves in food chain. The organic form of sulfur, which is consumed by the animals through their food, and the sulfur it is moves in the food chain. So when the animals die, some of the sulfur it is released by decomposition, while some enter into tissues of microbes. So in this, when the animals die, some of the sulfur it is released by decomposition, while some enter into the tissues of microbes. There are several natural sources such as volcanic eruptions and evaporation of water and breakdown of organic matter in swamps that release sulfur directly into the atmosphere. This sulfur falls on earth, so it with rainfall. So this sulfur it is falls on earth with rainfall. So here there are several natural sources of such as volcanic eruptions, evaporation of water, and breakdown of organic matter in swamps, and these processes will release sulfur directly into the atmosphere. So different steps of the sulfur cycle. First one is formation of inorganic sulfur. Formation of inorganic sulfur. It occurs through two different processes. First one is biological, second one is geological. Second one is geological. So in biological, by decomposes present in the soil. So here The formation of inorganic sulfur, takes place by the decomposers present in the soil. The decomposers which are present in the soil, these will produce the inorganic sulfur. So second one is geological. So that is through weathering of rocks formed from geological uplift helps us to tackle problems like pollution, floods, or ozone depletion or global warming. So second one is through the weathering of rocks. So first one is by decomposers, second one is through the weathering of rocks. So by these two process, the inorganic sulfur it is produced, it is formed. So second step is oxidation of inorganic sulfur to the sulfate. First step is formation of inorganic sulfur. Formation of inorganic sulfur. Second step is oxidation of inorganic sulfur. Oxidation of inorganic sulfur into sulfate. So here it is also involving two steps. Like first one is hydrogen sulfide. It is oxidized to produce elemental sulfur. Hydrogen sulfide, it is oxidized to produce elemental sulfur by certain photosynthetic bacteria such as uh, chlorobias, and it is also chromotypes. So this is species, different species. So here hydrogen sulfide is oxidized to produce elemental sulfur by certain photosynthetic bacteria. So different bacteria, so which are used for the oxidation of hydrogen sulfide to elemental sulfur. In this hydrogen sulfide, it is oxidized to produce elemental sulfur by certain photosynthetic bacteria. So elemental sulfur, it is then converted into sulfate by chemolitho chemolithotrophic bacteria. Chemolithotrophic bacteria. Elemental sulfur, it is then converted into sulfate. First in this second step, it is also having two steps. First step is in this hydrogen sulfide. Hydrogen sulfide, it is converted into elemental sulfur by photosynthetic bacteria. Photosynthetic bacteria. So second one is elemental sulfur. In this, it is oxidized into sulfate ions. So this is also by using bacteria, that is chemolithotrophic bacteria. So here hydrogen sulfate, oxidation of inorganic sulfur to sulfate, it is having two steps. So in first step, hydrogen sulfate, it is undergoing oxidation in presence of photosynthetic bacteria, and also the second step is sulfur, it is converted into sulfate by using bacteria. So third step is assimilative reduction of sulfate to sulfide. Assimilative reduction of sulfate to sulfide. So here sulfide, again this sulfur, in this the second step sulfur is converted into sulfate. So third step sulfate again converted into sulfide. So this is also known as sulfur reduction. In first two steps of second step, it is undergoing oxidation. In third step, it is undergoing reduction. So it is sulfate, it is undergoing reduction, and it is forming sulfide. So it is also known as sulfur reduction. It is performed by plants, fungi, and various microorganisms such as mm, such as Tesilo sorry. So this third step is assimilative reduction of sulfate to sulfide. So it is also known as sulfur reduction. So it is performed by plants, fungi, and various microorganisms such as D-sulfur vibrio and D-sulfur bulbus. So species in two steps. So this is also having two steps, and it is in this sulfur reduction is taking place. In this sulfur reduction means sulfides are converted into sulfide in presence of various fungi and microorganisms. So it is also having two steps. Sulfates are converted into sulfides. Reduction of sulfides to hydrogen sulfide. So first one is sulfates are converted into sulfides, and reduction of sulfides. So these are sulfides to hydrogen sulfide. So here S means sulfur, SO2, SO4 minus 2 means sulfate, SO2 it is sulfur dioxide, H2S hydrogen sulfide. So in this first step is sulfates, SO4 minus 2, this will converted into sulfides, sulfides, SO4 minus 2 converted into SO3 minus 2, sulfates converted into sulfides. So second one is the reduction of sulfides into hydrogen sulfide, hydrogen sulfide. So these are the two reduction process which are in assimilated reduction of sulfate to sulfide. So these are also performed by the fungi and various microorganisms. So incorporation of sulfide into organic compounds. So the sulfide assimilated is converted into an organic form which the animals consume and fix through the foods they eat. So the fourth step is incorporation of sulfide into organic compound. So fourth step it is incorporation of sulfide into organic compounds. So the sulfide assimilated. So this is converted into organic form which the animals consume. So these are consumed by the animals and these fixed through the foods they eat. So once these plants and animals die, decomposers release the fixed organic sulfur back into the atmosphere. So it is in the form of elemental sulfur. So here, once the animals or plants die, decomposer release the fixed organic sulfur back to the its free form as elemental sulfur. So this is the fourth step. So in first step, so here formation of inorganic sulfur by the two process biological and geological. Second step it is oxidation of inorganic sulfur to sulfate. So in first it is also having two steps in this hydrogen sulfide. So this is oxidized into elemental sulfur. So then sulfur is converted into sulfate ion. So this is second step in oxidation of inorganic sulfur to sulfate. In third step, so this is a reduction step, sulfur reduction step. This is also having two steps. So here is in first step sulfates are reduced to sulfides. Second step sulfides are reduced to hydrogen sulfides. In fourth step, this incorporation of sulfide, these are into organic compounds. So these sulfide compounds which are converted into organic form, these are consumed by the animals and these are moves in the food chain. So once these plants and animals die, decomposes, these will release the fixed organic sulfur back into atmosphere as in the form of elemental sulfur. So these are the steps involved in the sulfur cycle. So what is the importance of sulfur cycle? Uh, what is the importance of sulfur cycle to living organisms? So forming an essential components of all kinds of proteins and some vitamins, hormones and living organisms. So the sulfur it is forming an essential component of all kinds of proteins, some vitamins, hormones and living organisms. So the sulfur producing fossil fuels such as coal, petroleum and natural gas. Fossil fuel such as coal, petroleum and natural gas. This is also contributing to majority of metal deposits because of its ability to act as an oxidizing as well as reducing agent. It is also serving as a source of energy to sulfur reducing bacteria present in the hydrothermal vents. Sulfur it is also reducing the sulfur cycle it is also reducing the global warming caused by the greenhouse gases by absorbing the ultraviolet radiation of the sun. So this is very important work of function of sulfur cycle. So this is reducing the global warming caused by the greenhouse gases by absorbing the ultraviolet radiation from the sun. So this is the sulfur cycle helping in the growth of plants, the primary producers of ecosystems. So these are very important functions of so the importance of sulfur cycle to living organism. These are forming essential component of all kinds of proteins and some vitamins and hormones in living organisms. These are producing fossil fuels such as coal, petroleum and natural gas. So these cycle it is contributing majority of metal deposits because its ability to act as an oxidizing as well as reducing agent. So it is also serving as a source of energy to the sulfur reducing bacteria present in hydrothermal vents. And the most important thing is it is reducing the global warming caused by the greenhouse gases by absorbing the ultraviolet radiation of the sun. So this is the sulfur cycle. It is helping in the growth of plants and the primary producers of ecosystem. So this is the sulfur cycle. So in this sulfur, in this cycle, if you see this is sulfur. So this is sulfur. It is converted into sulfate. So these sulfates are consumed by the animal or plants. So these again this from the plants and animals these are converted into sulfides. So first these are converted into sulfides. These are converted into sulfur. Sulfur it is converted into sulfur dioxide. Sulfur sulfate. So this is consumed by animal or plants. So this is the cycle. So in this process, this is undergoing oxidation. So in this process, this is undergoing reduction. So this is also reduction. So this is also reduction. So like this is a sulfur cycle. If we start from this rock or runoff water, or these sulfide ions are produced by the different processes from the weathering of rock or runoff water, by the fertilizers which are and these industrial discharges. So these are producing sulfate ions. These are sulfates, so which are consumed by the plants. These plants are consumed by the animals. Means the plants and animals. These are having the sulfur content. So after that, these sulfur which is present in animal after dying of the animal and plants. So we will get sulfide ions, sulfide form of sulfur. So this is again undergoing uh, oxidation, that is chemical oxidation and forming S2O3 minus sulfate ions. So by using sulfur reducing bacteria, this S minus 2 it is converted into S. Sulfide it is converted into sulfite. So that is by using sulfur reducing bacteria. So here this is a sulfur cycle. So in this cycle, sulfur is moves in different forms from one place to another place. So this is sulfur cycle. This is very important to our ecosystem. This is the step 1 formation of inorganic sulfur. So in this step 1, that organic sulfur, this sulfur it is converted into sulfate. In step 2, sulfate ions are converted into sulfur. So in the step 3, so these sulfur compounds, so these are forming sulfide. So these are converted into sulfide. In step 4, so these sulfides are converted into again sulfur. So this is the cycle of sulfur. So how do human affect the sulfur cycle? How do human affect the sulfur cycle? Human intervention release excess sulfur into the environment. Human intervention, it is releases excess sulfur into environment, thus disturbing the sulfur cycle in following ways. So it is releasing sulfur from oil and coal based power plants. The sulfur it is released from oil and coal based power plants, and it is released from processing of sulfur containing metals, and it is using sulfur containing fertilizers. So the sulfur which is emitted through all the above human activities, so these reacts with the water, oxygen and other chemicals in atmosphere. The sulfur which is emitted to the various processes, so which are committed by the human activities, so reacts with the water, oxygen and other chemicals in the atmosphere and precipitates down in the form of rains. It precipitates down in the form of acid rain. So that rain is called as acid rain, and it reduces the agriculture yield, affects marine life, and it damages the buildings and monuments presented on the earth. So in this, so how do human affect the sulfur cycle means? So humans, the human beings, these are producing the sulfur in various process. So these are releasing the sulfur. It is releasing from the oil and coal based power plants, processing of sulfur containing metals using sulfur containing fertilizers. So these sulfur which is emitted through the all the various process. So this sulfur react with the water, oxygen, and other chemicals which are present in atmosphere, and this precipitates down in the form of rain. So which is nothing but acid rain. So the acid rain, it reduces the agriculture yield, affect the marine life, and damages buildings and monuments. So this is about sulfur cycle. Thank you.
Like, share and subscribe. Hit the bell icon for more updates.